Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast, a place to discuss pain, passion, and pursuits.
I want to feel alive.
Breathe.
Make some moves.
Protect the throne. This is Sexy Freedom Media Podcast.
All right. Welcome to Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. I'm your host, Helen Edwards, and I'm with my co-host,
Liddell.
And today we have a special guest with us, Tammy Joy. Tammy, tell us a little bit about you.
Hey, thanks for having me today. Let's see. So I'm a mom of 3. I'm an Iraq veteran. I'm a suicide attempt survivor. I kind of hustle a lot of different things. So now I advocate for suicide prevention and just reminding people that they matter and you can make it through hard things and stay for your future you. So
that's so awesome.
Excellent.
Tammy, what besides being a suicide attempt survivor, what else, can you tell us about the movement that you wanted, that why you're doing it, why you're advocating for that?
So someone said it, like, I'm the mom that I wish I had. They said that about being a mom. And for me, like, I'm that person that I wish I had when I was in the darkest place and no one's really talking about it. You're just supposed to smile and say, I'm okay. But the more we can talk about our stories, like I think of your story and sharing your story, it opens possibilities. If you hear someone else's story that made it through or did something differently, then it opens the possibility that I can too. So
my husband was actually also a Iraq veteran. And so I know that as, those in the military, especially, I think the statistic is now 22 per hour, 22 per day.
Per day, yeah.
Per day, yeah, 22 per day. So can you tell us a little bit more about your experience being in the military? And was that the reason why, you attempted suicide?
Well, so first, thanks for your service, because you have the hardest job in the Army. That's like, I've been a wife of a soldier and a soldier. So I know that, when you're a soldier, you're gone, you have things to do, but the weight of everything else is left on the wife or husband at home. So thank you to you and so being in Iraq, there was tons of adrenaline and that kind of thing, and you come home and it's just like laundry, it's just, so that kind of rush for adrenaline probably played into it, as well as just transitioning. So I went right in 2003, so I think now it's better, but back then you were just in Baghdad on Tuesday and in Salt Lake City on, the next day. And so I think about olden day wars, whatever, like they had this time of transition, still together, but the war was over. But now it's just like you lose that family, you lose all that camaraderie, and then you're just back with these people that's your family that don't get you. And so it's hard to transition. It's hard to just pick up and go throughout the normal boring day, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in because that's exactly what happened. Sorry, Helen. I've been in that kind of time frame too, because our first deployment was Iraq, and that was 2005. We had just gotten married like a month prior to. So he left during our first, year. And so you're right, that transition part is crucial because all of a sudden, you're in your regular civilian life, not civilian, but, you're in the States. And then all of a sudden now you're in this foreign country, totally different culture. And then I'm sure you've seen things during that deployment. And then you get home and you're expected to be that same person, and you're not.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely get that transitional part.
Yeah, and that's one thing I talk about too, is like watching for people in transition, like death, divorce, moving. that's where we can really lose people, because it's so, you're kind of in between, you know, you're just hanging out, you're not really here or there. And so if we as the world can just give space and grace and notice people who are in transition and reach out more, and people who are in transition realize that it's probably going to be harder than you think it's going to be, and then leave the space when someone asks you if you're okay. Don't always say yes. I mean, if it's like passing in the grocery store, fine, okay. But if someone's like, how are you really, then just really being honest with ourselves and others, so that the worst case scenario is you talk to someone today and they're fine and they're gone tomorrow.
So how do you differentiate? So I know there are people in transition, but there are sometimes that you ask that question, well, how are you? And the response is typically, well, I'm fine, I'm okay, you know? So, but they're not okay. So then now, what do you do? What are your tips in terms of trying to get that person to realize that, hey, you need help?
So one thing I do is I ask them for help. So sometimes getting help is too much. It's sticky. You don't want to feel like you need help all the time. But if you say, are you okay? And then sometimes I'll just look at them longer. So give that space, not just passing, but ask them again. And then be like, hey, like whatever they're good at, whatever's easy for them, if we ask for their help, then it gives them they can contribute, they can be around people, because it's a different feeling. Like, I think you're suicidal, so I need to watch over you, versus I know you're really good at websites, can you sit down with me and play with mine? Or I know you love or I'm cleaning my house, can you just come talk to me while I clean? And so it's giving them the space to enter your space in a more helping way than a being helped way.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you so much too for your service, because that's, especially 2003 was the height, of everything that was going on. So thank you so much for your.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm going to second that right there. Yeah, thank you, Tammy. And thank you, January, for your husband also. I know my son is serving right now. He's just wrapped up 4 years, and then he's going to be going to Italy for 2 years. And there's so much going on in the world today. So there's obviously that, that fear of like, oh my goodness, is there going to be a war with the US? Like, is this coming? And, what's going to happen to our kids that are now serving? And, but going back to what Tammy said, that's a really, really good point about if somebody says, no, I don't need help. And usually it's like somebody who's very strong-willed and they don't want to be known as like, oh, I'm weak, because it's still in our minds. I'm a strong person. So I know, like, if somebody asks me if I'm having a rough day and I don't want to show that side, I'm going, my strong side's going to kick in, like, no, I got this. When I clearly just last night had a conversation with myself that I'm so lonely, so, but Tammy hit a good point. Like, we're just searching for purpose. We're searching for that next, if you will, that next high that will like keep us rolling on being somebody that people will need our help for. And I often think of my brother who did take his life and, left too soon. And I think when somebody does take their life who's really close to you, you're constantly thinking about it. Like, it's like you're trying to fit in pieces, when it could have been just the most simplest thing that day. The simplest thing, just somebody saying, come over, I need help putting together a desk, but for whatever reason, things just didn't work out that way. And, it is where it's at right now in the past. So moving forward, like, it's not like I go around seeking like who needs help and what's going to happen. And I've also learned how to let go of taking responsibility for somebody who does want to take their life, and I recently actually just had to call somebody and talk them off the ledge, somebody very close to me. And I felt very appreciative that somebody reached out to me and said, hey, talk to this person. So that was great. And I did everything in my power, but there was a part of me during that call that thought to myself, I'm not going to take responsibility for whatever turns out today. I'm just not. And I had to tell myself that in that moment, so that way I could let go of anything that happened and know that I gave it my all to help that person get off that ledge.
Yeah, I love that, not taking responsibility, because so I'm thinking about like when I was in such a dark place, who could have said what? It's not even about anyone else. And it's so like the triggers can be so simple. Like it could just be overwhelm. It could just be like one too many things. Like I think about, so the last time was actually like I'm going through a lot of transition, and it just feels overwhelming. And then like my car started on fire, and I just snapped, and I was just like, I'm over this, and it just, things worked out and I'm still here. But what I'm saying is, yeah, you cannot take responsibility, and being able to live past that for someone, like be happy, get happy. Like dying with them doesn't help anyone. If you lost someone and then you die with them and you're still here, like that's the worst case scenario. If you can just find a way to, get happy and find a way to keep living for them.
Thank you. I'm glad that you decided to live. So that's, thank God that you decided to do that. It's tough because I feel like, and we've talked about this, Helen, before, how the mind is this powerful, such a powerful tool. And, we can get so lost in our thoughts. And that is, I think that's the issue, is that it's like so high and so low, right? Like yourself so high and don't get yourself, so kind of be that even keel. But it's very difficult because we can continue to dig that hole, and our mind can go in so many directions. So good job. Good for you for staying and living. So, because it is hard. Life is hard. My cousin's husband actually committed suicide. His son, I just saw his son, so my nephew, I just saw him a few days ago, um and my cousin's brother, so my cousin told his nephew finally exactly what happened. So he's 19, and when this happened he was 3 or 4. And so he was shocked, but my cousin had to tell him. He said, well, I have to tell him the truth. And so that's the hard fact, that there's the side of the actual person that commits suicide, and then there's the other side of, well, now there's like family, like Helen, and like my nephew. There's family now that's left to process what has happened. And it's difficult for the person living because they miss the person so much, and I think there's all these unanswered questions. So it's a tough subject, because we are dealing with like the heart, right? Like what was really going on with our heart and with our thoughts. And it's really, what you were talking about, not, Helen was saying it, not taking responsibility. And it's tough because we really want to save that person. But at the end of the day, it's that person that has to save themselves. Mm-hmm. That person has to make that decision. Mm-hmm. And that's the toughest part, because if that person is so stuck in their depression and so stuck in that hole, it's hard to dig themselves out. Mm-hmm. So what are your, like, I mean, how do we prevent that? How do we prevent somebody from continuing to be in that hole?
So I'm working on my next book. It's called Putting the Pre in Suicide Prevention, because I feel like we're so like late. We're late to the party. So someone's on the edge of the cliff calling 988, like let's back it up a few months, years, and I met with my friend, and he had this circle, and it was in three, kind of like a peace sign. And there were three sections. It was like family, work, and your future. And so I kind of took it and I made it into a peace pie, and like letting people know they have control over this pie, because I think people don't realize they have control. So if every day work and family is taking too much, or work's taking up the whole pie, like each person has to take responsibility for every piece of that pie to be taken care of. And so if we just have these conversations where, like, stay for the future you, like maybe right now you can't just choose to be happy. Like I remember thinking, if I hear just choose to be happy one more time, I'm going to punch someone in the face, because to me, it felt like I had a closet of black clothes and happiness was a yellow dress. Like it's not in there to choose from. But there are actions that we can take each day that can create a pathway to that happiness. Or we can find someone with a yellow dress and say, how do I get that? And I think that's one thing we discussed, was thinking about who we hang around, who we spend our time with. Find someone who has what you want. Wait, first, decide what you want. Sometimes we're just such in this rat race that we don't even know what we want. When's the last time, you sat down and thought, what do I want? Because I thought I wanted to travel and train, and then I got that job and I was like, this is success. This isn't success. I was just home alone in a hotel room at night, and so taking the time to create the life you want, first of all, then finding people who have it, hanging around them. If you guys seen that quote, it's like, before you diagnose yourself with depression, bipolar, make sure, in fact, you're not surrounded by assholes, And so it's a two-part accountability. We got to take accountability for how we show up. What am I doing? But then also there comes a time where you got to let people go.
Yeah. Gosh, that's such a good point, because I'm very open about, my own battles with suicide. I mean, I've tried plenty of times. And when I say plenty, probably about a handful, from the age of 14 all the way to 28, maybe. And then it started slowing down as I started learning more about how the brain and the hormones and the body operates together. Because I also realized, like, my hormones are off. They just tend to go berserk sometimes. And when they go berserk, I just realized it's not everybody else. It actually is me in that moment. And then I started thinking I have multiple personalities, because somebody over here is trying to kill me and somebody over here is trying to heal me. It's like, what the heck? And they're having a war while I'm just sitting there eating popcorn, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me today? And and then I just started realizing it is everything. It's everything. Everything's got to do with it. It is when I was in really, really bad relationships, and I was like, this person's every time I'm trying to dig my way out, they just keep putting me back into this hole. So it was that I was like, screw my life. Then I got rid of that person, and then I found myself by myself, and then I was the one putting me in the hole. And I was like, man, what the heck? Like, everything in this world is trying to hurt me. Like, whoa, what is happening? And then there goes back to that quote, only the strong survive. And then I thought that wasn't true, because there's some weaklings that do make it through. I don't know how they do it, but they do, like sheer luck, and I so I just started thinking, okay, it's a huge world. I'm thinking about everybody else. Let's just take it down a notch, and let's just start thinking of myself for once. And what you were saying about the yellow dress, brilliant. I started searching, started looking at my circle, started really thinking about my own yellow dress in my closet. Let's just say, like, you're right, there's all black dresses, but I know I've had a yellow dress because I've worn a yellow dress before. So where is it? I'm digging out and it's sitting there somewhere. Maybe it's just in a different closet, so I got to open that closet in my mind. And you know, what you're talking about recently, I've recently gone through an ordeal, and I thought to myself, sometimes this is how I know my wiring's a little off, and it is inside of me. Uh, because sometimes everything could be going right in my life. Everything. Great relationships, health is great, my mindset's great, and all of a sudden I'll get this weird idea that I'm just tired of playing the game, because I've lived this life so many times already. I've had it all, I've lost it all, I've had it all, I've gained it all, I've lost, I've traveled the world. We're like, and I get this like boredom, like, you know, what's on the other side? What's on the other side of life? And I'll start thinking to myself, like, well, what are you doing? Where are you going with this? And I'll really think to myself, like, I don't want to live anymore. Like, I'm bored of it. And I'm like, what is happening? You know? So then I think to myself, okay, sometimes it's not depression. Sometimes you're wired this way. And that's the way I've realized I'm wired. And when I can realize the way I'm wired, then I like to use my metaphors, my warriors swoop in, and they like basically surround me, like, okay, keep moving, because it's a phase in my mind. It's a season I'm going through. And once I can get past that season, it's like that good medicine comes in and takes over. I don't know. Is that anything any of you have experienced?
Yeah, remembering that it's a phase, it's a season. And just like the moon, you know, the moon is full, it's waning and waxing, and sometimes it's not there. And it's okay. No one's looking at the moon and being like, oh, you're such an asshole. You were full the other day and now you're like not even here. It's just like every phase is beautiful, and realizing it's okay. Whatever, like I have days where I'm so effective. I literally do more in a day than people do in a year. I'm not kidding. And then I can get out of bed some days. And so I used to spiral down, beat myself up. But now I just lay there. I'm like, I'm just laying here today because that's how it is. And then I'll know I'll get another effective day. So kind of tracking your patterns. I'll never forget the time my sister called. She's like, I'm tracking you. Like, oh my gosh, you creeper. But it's like, sometimes you got to help people track themselves so you can see, you know, like you're okay. You're up, you're down, you're around, and it's okay. And just like I get bored too. I'm like, everything is good. I should be happy, you know, like nothing's really wrong. My life is like completely different than it used to be. What is my problem? But asking better questions. So if you ask, what is my problem? Your brain will just go to work, go to work. But if you start asking, like, why am I so happy? Why am I so awesome? Why am I, you know, and you start asking these kind of questions, your brain will go to work to give you proof. And so I think that's one thing I wish I had known when I was little. Like, stop asking why am I so stupid? Why do I always do this? Those questions that just downward spiral. We're like, why am I so amazing? Like, it just feels better.
Totally. I love that positive words, you know. I think so I don't know if you've seen that study with the rice. So there was a study of the rice, cooked rice, and one rice was told all these positive things, the other rice wasn't really told anything, and the other rice was told all the negative things. And you can see a completely, you know, complete difference between all three. The one with the positive words of affirmation remained kind of white and fluffy, but the one that was negative, you know, it was dark and you know, it was gray and black and all that. It was, anyway, you can tell a difference. So yes, definitely asking like the right positive questions, you know, to yourself. Helen, I'm the same way. There are moments where like I will think like, is this it? Like, is there more to life? Like, everything's going fine, but there are moments that I'm like, what is on the other side? You know, what is on the other side? I have tried to commit suicide myself. When I was a teenager, you know, I didn't feel like I was good enough. And I think that whole feeling of I'm not good enough. I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't tall enough. I wasn't skinny enough, you know. And and then of course relationships too, you know, that can get the better of us. And then we're like, okay, I just want to kill myself. So I've attempted a couple times to do that. And then I was thinking, so one of the times that I was thinking about committing suicide, my brain told me, yeah, but then if I fall out of this like roof, then I'm gonna really hurt myself. In my mind, I was like, I already knew, like, well, I don't want to hurt myself, you know? So thankfully, I did have that subconscious of me telling myself that's really going to be painful, you know? Um, and I'm not at that point. I wasn't at that point where I really, 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 really wanted to die. But there are people out there, you know, that want to feel that pain. You said something earlier, Tammy, about how, people were telling you to choose happy, and you just want to punch that person in the face. That was such a different perspective for me because I am that person that says choose happy,
Right.
but the idea to like, that's annoying. Like, how do you in your mind, you're like, that's annoying. Why are people telling me to choose happy? I don't want to choose happy right now. Kind of like, I remember when I was giving birth and my husband was telling me to breathe, and I'm like, fuck you, I am breathing. Like, stop telling me to breathe. I'm breathing. I'm so upset. So I get that. Now it's like, oh, okay. When my husband was telling me to breathe when I was trying to breathe during labor and I was trying to give birth, like, oh yeah, okay. That makes sense now. But yeah, so I thank you for that perspective. It definitely switched my mind into like, how people are thinking, in that moment. And it's so you're right, like the whole I love that you're doing that book. Thank you for doing that book because I don't think we really talk about the I think we talk about the right at the moment of suicide, but it really should be like the pre stuff. So
Yeah.
thank you. So tell us a little bit more about that book.
So it's going to be a lot about you. Okay, so I've had people tell me like, you're not Jesus, stop trying to save people. And I'm like, okay. So stepping back from trying to save and just full responsibility, like no one can eat for me. Nobody could sleep for me. No one can get crap out for me. Like there's certain things that you have to do. But if you think about it, we don't even sometimes take the time to like deal with our crap. If every morning you started with an empty palette, it'd be easier to deal with the crap of the day, but we start full of crap, And so just doing these daily things that no one else can do for you. And then, okay, so I had to start from the outside in because I couldn't go from I want to kill myself to self-love. And people are like, oh, you just have to love yourself. And I'm like, oh, clearly, if I could do that, I would do that. And so I had to start serving. I had to start getting out of my own head. So I went from the outside in. Now, let's see, probably it was 2015. My fourth husband left me. Like, I'll never forget this. And it was the first time I thought I might be part of the problem. Like I had blamed number one, I'd blamed my whole life away. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I might be part of the problem. And so I had to start taking a look at how I was showing up. And from the outside in, looks like I started looking for the good in others. I mean, I had so many years I couldn't even take a picture of myself. Like I tried to go find pictures of me and my kids when they're babies. I don't have any. But as I started, noticing people, if someone has bright green hair, like watch their face when you're like, I really like your hair. Or, like people spend a lot of money on their hair, on their clothes, nice shirt, like simple things. If you do this, but looking for the good in others, I started to see the good in myself. And I'll remember we were on a cruise ship. We had painted our faces and I took a selfie of myself. And it was the first time I felt beautiful ever. And I was like 30 something. And I'm like, why do we live in a world where most women are like waiting for this is when I'm going to be happy. Like when my baby tummy is gone, I'll be happy. Oh, she's 12. So, it's just like, it's always but just embracing like, okay, just embracing what is right now. And that's okay too. And not always waiting for the someday. So and also like being in the moment is important, because I remember I'm always like, oh, and things like always, never, those really mess up your brain, but just stop saying words like that. But always, everyone, everything, every time, like there's such absolutes. If you say everyone, like 7 billion people, like it's not everyone. It's specifically 1 or 2 people, not everyone. But so back to being in the moment, I go a lot of places, and so I'm not really ever here. But I went to Africa in 2017, and I was like missing the moment because I was planning for Africa. And then I got to Africa and I'm like, I can't wait to be home. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this my whole life. Wherever I am, I'm waiting for the next place. And so what happened in Africa is I didn't have a phone. I couldn't distract like I used to. So I had to sit with myself. And it hurts. It hurts to be like, okay, why do I have to be going? Why, you know? And my sister made a comment. She's like, since you came back from Africa, like you are definitely more present. And I was like, oh yeah. And so it's just being in the moment, and like, yeah, we have to prepare for the future. We have to pack for the next thing, but we don't have to let our mind be consumed and miss the moment right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's you have to practice being in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to practice, because the world can be so distracting. There's a Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, quote, and that's something that I want to do, for another podcast. But that quote was about how the world can be so noisy, and how not too many of us take the time to self-reflect, and really dig deep. And instead, what we're doing is looking outside. We're looking outside for something to make us happy, when really we just have to sit still and be happy with ourselves. But we are so eager to compare ourselves to somebody else. Oh, that person is taller, that person is shorter, that person is fat, skinnier than me, and I want to be, or there's a skinny person that's like, well, I want to gain more weight, right? So there's all these different things that we're comparing ourselves to. Sometimes we compare ourselves to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and how we were back then, or whatever. And so I like how you said that we need to be mindful of those words that we say to ourselves, the every, the always, the never, like all those words as well, because they can be absolute. Much like the comparing ourselves to other people, it's like, oh, are we saying that they're better than us? That's what we're saying. We're better. They're better than us. They have something better than us, and where we should just be grateful, right? That's the one thing that I feel like we should be doing, is being grateful for who we are at this very present time. But it takes a lot to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely a habit. It's definitely, creating pathways in your brain to look for the good, because we can get caught up in those loops of negativity. I used to, or I came up with this idea. I don't know if I came up with this idea. I wrote a paper once about a suicide superhighway. Like my brain would go to suicide over the dingedest thing. Like that road to suicide was so huge. It was a 6-lane highway. And so if we can shrink that down, put off ramps, and make it a little tiny back road lane versus a super highway, it's just creating new pathways and off ramps and different options. Because if someone criticizes you and you go to suicide, like it gets exhausting. It's like this person would say it was exhausting being in a relationship with me, and I'm like, think how I feel. Like I have to be with me all the time, and so it's just like slowing down, realizing you have options, and then creating space for each other as well. And then real quick, what you said about comparing yourself to you and you, it's just like the moon. You can't compare yourself to you and you as much as you can't compare yourself to others, because there's so many factors. So I love that.
Yeah. And you're right. There are so many factors, and I think I do pause. Like there are moments where I catch myself, right? And I think that's the key is catching ourselves. I mean, it goes back down to responsibility. We have the responsibility to take care of ourselves.
Mhm.
It's nobody else's responsibility. It's really ours. Yes, we should be surrounded by, positive people. Yes, that's all important, but it's also very important, very vital for us to take care of ourselves. And I love what you're doing, Tammy, because what you're doing is you're keeping yourself accountable. It's much like a Sunday school teacher. Okay. So people who teach Sunday school, it's because they also want to keep themselves accountable, right? They also want to be able to grow, and learn more. So what you're doing is you're creating the space for yourself to keep yourself accountable and to keep yourself not in the sixth path, the sixth lane of suicide, right? But you're narrowing it down. So yeah, so good for you for keeping yourself accountable.
Thank you.
Yeah, real quick, I was gonna say something about when you were talking about, that insecurity of yourself and, taking your selfie for the first time at 36. And, as we're growing, I've noticed for myself, I wrote a whole book on sex and being, stepping into my sexuality and being, just feeling good about myself. And I've been very bold about it, but it was part of my identity as well, And then I hit my 40s and all of a sudden I'm, getting gray hair and things are changing with my skin. Things are changing with my hormones. And I recently had a surgery and I got swelly belly for the first time. So I have not a huge stomach, but like a stomach now, and I've never had that before my whole entire life. And it's funny because this morning I threw on some Spanish music and I was like, I'm gonna make this bed, and I could see my belly like jiggling, like boom, 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 boom. And I was like, yeah, yeah. And I was like, I started dancing with my belly because I got like so excited that was like jiggling like my butt twerks, and and I started thinking like nobody else was around, that I'm having fun with my new swelly belly. And I was like, yeah, swelly belly, swelly belly, swelly belly. And I'm just like, okay. A couple days ago, it was a totally different experience. I was like, I am getting rid of you. We are working out, So I had like this thought today, like, whoa, both days were fine. Both days were okay. Both days were embracing that moment I was in. And I could have did a whole lot of comparing, but I try to really catch myself when I go to those places, because we all go to those places, right? And so that was one thing I was going to mention about embracing your differences, I'll say, or your newness, or your just whatever's on your body. But the other thing I was going to say too is we're using the word suicide, right? Because it's all I've known it to be my whole entire life. I've recently started noticing online that you really can't find like suicide hashtags a whole lot, because now they're using, and I say they because I think it's like a younger generation now, they're starting to use the word unalive. And I don't know if you saw that or seen it or heard it. And I started wondering, why is everybody saying unalive when it's suicide? And then I think what I've started realizing is that the word suicide is very triggering. It's so embedded in us. And I think that they're trying to, whoever they are, there's a movement that's trying to get away from words that are triggering. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was I was talking to someone at the VA, and they said it's only 16 a day. That statistic of 22 suicides a day is 16. And I'm like, why the sudden drop? And they're like, well, because they changed the statistics. It's not 22s a day is veterans, soldiers, all encompassing. But if it's just veterans, then it's 16 a day. So I'm like, by change, to me, that feels a little bit, I don't know why that came up, but it's just like, you can't change something and make it less. Like, it doesn't change the problem by changing the words or changing the statistics to get a lower number. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes
No,
sense.
yeah, I agree. I think that just changing the name, I actually didn't know that. So thanks for bringing that up, Helen, on Alive. Yeah, it doesn't change the idea or the fact that people are committing suicide. And I think to drop it down to 16, I mean, on one hand, it's like, okay, that sounds positive, right? Because then, you know, but then it also feels like we're going to be complacent. It's like, okay, it's just 16, and it's just unalive. And I don't really even know what that really truly means yet. I'm still trying to process that. Um, but I like the fact that we are, we do have to bring it out, right? That is something that we do have to talk about. I think all of us have either one, tried and attempted, where two, we have friends or family that have, committed. That's actually crazy because it's all three of us. All three of us have actually experienced that. And who knows, like at this very moment, somebody might be at that spot. I did want to bring to light and honor him. Don, there's this veteran who, my husband was they were coworkers. He actually was a TED speaker as well. He was a TED speaker. Yeah. And he did talk about suicide. And it's a tough, it's a tough road. I mean, he did end up committing suicide, sadly, but he tried. But I think again, it's like bringing back to light, like, who are we surrounding ourselves with, and are we talking to other people about it? Because I think if we stop talking about it and we stop talking about our feelings and our emotions and things that are trapped inside of us, it could lead to a really dark path. And whether it's unalive, whether it's suicide, whatever the words are, they're both words that are leading down a wrong path. What's that saying about a temporary or making a permanent solution for a temporary problem? And I think those that are feeling that way, it can be so like Stranger Things. I don't know if you've watched Stranger Things. But Stranger Things, there's a scene in there where it's like just this like mirrored type of floor, and the person's in there, and it's like that person can't get out, right? There's that, and there's the upside down world, right? The upside down world, and they're just stuck in this upside down world, and nothing can like break them from it until that person hears music, right? And music, we've talked about music, how music can bring us joy, and that's the one thing that I really do want to stress out, is that if you are feeling in this type of manner, find joy, find it, because there's a way for you to, to get yourself out. Sorry, I'm thinking of Stranger Things. I don't know what that just when we're talking about, for some reason that came to mind. But yeah, find joy. I think that's probably the toughest thing, because it's so easy. And I know all of us have experienced this, where we're, saying all these things, these negative self-talk to ourselves, and we can continue down that path of saying those negative things, or, and feel like, okay, we're just stuck, right? We're stuck in this negative thing. It has to be something inside of us that's like, okay, let me swim back up, swim back up from that hole. Yeah, finding joy. I think that's probably the most that I can kind of share in this particular space. Find joy.
I love that. Well, and so my middle name is Joy now, and I didn't have a middle name. I was not given a middle name at all. And I was resentful for like 35 years. And then one day someone's like, why don't you just give yourself one? And I was just like, oh, okay. And so I think sometimes it's not that we need permission, it's that we never had that thought, and so by talking and by finding our joy or giving ourselves joy, whatever, then it triggers that people can do that too. So I just moved to this house. It's like an 1863 farmhouse. So you can imagine. But the back sliding door doesn't work. And I mostly live there myself. So I'm just like a little creeped out. And I'm complaining to my sister. And she's like, oh, why don't you put a stick in it? And I was just like, wow, why didn't I have that thought? And she goes, well, have you ever had a sliding door with a broken lock? And I'm like, no. And so that's most people, you can't have a thought about a solution if you've never been in that situation. And so, you know, people be so cruel about common sense and like, what's their problem? Common sense. But it's so relative based on your experience. And so if we could just let that go and think common sense is so relative, and that's why it's important to talk and change our, you know, I could just not live with this broken lock and not tell anyone I'm worried about it, or I could just bring it up and now it's solved. So but Helen, back to Unalive, if that helps people talk more about it, I love it. Like if we have to change the wording and more people will talk about it and it's safer, awesome. Like just so we can have these conversations.
Yes, definitely. Good point. And I am going to take it right back to your middle name real quick, because you were just saying like nobody, you know, you didn't have a thought about that. I didn't have a thought about that. I've never had a middle name, and none of my siblings do. There was 5 of us, and none of us ever had a middle name. My mom didn't have a middle name. None of her siblings had a middle name. So I always wanted a middle name. And then I got older and I was like, you know, I'm kind of glad I don't have a middle name. It's so long already to write my own name. And but the last name, my last name has changed so many times throughout my whole entire life. My original last name is actually Helen Uvias. And then I went through Helen Canales, and then I was, you know, Helen Edwards, and now I'm going to be in, you know, Helen Olson, because I just got engaged, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, you know. So, but I love the idea of giving yourself a middle name. I actually have an Apache name, Ishkanashanya, you know, which means she who came close to me. And that's, you know, that's something I'm going to actually mention here, because when my mom was passing away, I spent, let's see, November, December, January. So 4 months with my mom when we found out she had terminal cancer. 4 months. 4 months of watching somebody sort of drift away every single day. And it was one of the greatest teachings to me that my mom gave me, because I like to say she taught me about life as I came into life, and then she taught me about death as she left the world. And I study under 3 Apache teachers, but the one that I began with, Bob Stevens, Bob Stevens, he is the one who taught me how to tell her and hold her hand, to tell her it's okay to go through, it's okay to leave. And since learning under the teachers and learning the Apache language, and it has really changed so much of my mindset, because of the way the language is versus the way the English language is, and versus, you know, some other languages I have learned, and the way that the Apache people, my people, have you know, we view the world versus how we view the world now. It's such a descriptive language, but it has given me so much purpose and so many different ways to look at life, look at death, you know, view the world differently than I ever have before. And it really has saved me in a way, because when my mom passed, it was so heartbreaking for me. She was my best friend, my confidant, you know, my safety net. If anything went bad in life, I'd just go stay with mom, you know. And for me to be the one to hold her hand and tell her to go, tell her it was time to go, and that I was ready to let her go, you know, for her to move on, was one of the strongest things I've ever had to do. But it really changed me to view life and death differently, you know. So going back to what January said, going back to what you're saying, Tammy, like, in just my little thing, my little suggestion as well, you know, your brain is developing the way that it's just kind of going and going and going, the way the world has basically trained you for it to go. But there's, like you said, you went to Africa and you were present there. I've also been to Africa, and that was a life-changing experience for me as well. And I think that if we look at different cultures and we just start learning different cultures and actually immerse ourselves into it, or back into our own cultures, all of us are probably from somewhere else as well. If we start going back to that culture and start learning more about it, that will give us a definite sense of purpose as well. Because I really feel that our culture it's in our living cells. And sometimes it's just really what's reaching it into us and saying, hey, I'm also here. I'm also here. Learn about me. Get in touch with me.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely purpose. I think, I love that Tammy's purpose now is, she's written a book, or she's writing a book, and, she's creating this movement, and I love that. And I think that's making you feel more alive, right? Is that you're like, okay, I have something to do. And I think for those that are feeling a certain way, right? They're in this hole. I I think I still find it, I think it's going to be hard for them to find their purpose, but if they make that decision, and that's something Tammy mentioned earlier, you got to make that decision. There is so much to learn. Currently, like I'm studying John C. Maxwell's, I'm in that program, and yeah, lots to learn about leadership, about, personal development, so much to learn. It's sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, there's not enough time in the day to do everything I want to do. But they have to, the first thing is definitely make that decision. So let me ask you, Tammy, because I want to go back to Joy. Why did you name yourself Joy?
So, so Lane is picked too. So, but the reason I picked Joy, it had nothing to do with joy. It was just, I was just like scrolling through names, getting ideas. And then my friends, I think I posted, like, I got to get a middle name. Who has an idea? And my friends, like, my grandma's name is Joy. And I was just like, oh, I love that. Because Lane, like, I love the letter L in cursive. And so I wanted it to start with an L, which is perfect because I love driving, and like Lane is like so perfect. But it's whatever you want. If you could change things, you're not trapped in whatever you're given.
You know what? You created it. You created it. And that's going back to one of our podcasts. We just did a podcast last week about owning our now. And what you did is you owned your now. You said, you know what? This is what I want. I want a middle name. You asked for, people's opinions. You got that. And then Lane, I love the L too. It is very pretty. Yeah, so pretty. So I like that you created it. And I think that's one thing that I'm learning and I'm reflecting, is that I can create whatever day that I want. I can create it. I can say, look, it's starting off shitty. It's kind of rough, but it doesn't have to end that way. So I'm finding out now in my 40s that, like, oh, well, I don't have to stay that upset. I don't have to stay angry. I can just, decide, well, what kind of day do I want, and where do I want to go? So I think the ability to have that power, and Helen said this to me, stand in your power. And that is it. We have the power. And I think sometimes we let that power go to somebody else or to something else, and we allow that person or that thing to overtake our power, where really we actually do have the power. We have the ability to step back and say, wait a second, I don't want this, I don't like this, how this is looking. Let me change it. And that's the beauty of changing our names. My last name used to be Cano, January Cano. And I don't have a middle name, actually. I thought my first name was Mary. Okay, look, Mary. Okay, Mary January. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so I thought my name was Mary. Then I found out, no, that's just my baptized name. In the Philippines, when you get baptized, you have to have a Christian, like Catholic name before you get baptized. So it was Mary January. And then I find out in high school, Mary's not on my birth certificate. So I'm like, oh. So it's just January. So I have 0 middle name. I haven't thought about adding a middle name. My middle name consists of my ancestors. So it's January Realeza Kano, and then Liddell is now my married name. Realeza actually means royalty, so that's my mom's maiden name. Kano is my dad's name, and then Liddell is my husband's name. So there you go. That's my name.
I love it. I love it.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing all this amazing stuff, ladies. We're gonna go ahead and wrap it up just to honor everybody's time here. But Tammy, thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to learning more about your book, and I know you have an amazing Facebook page. I like seeing your posts on there. So let everybody know where they can find you at, what's coming up next, or anything that you want to say.
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram at You Matter Mayor, Tammy Joy Lane on Facebook, and I'm actually going to start a podcast. I don't know all the details, so I'm just going to start doing Zooms. So if you want to be a guest, I can't think of a name, but that's been holding me up for a year, so I just going to start, and then I'll figure out a name. I'll let the name find me, I guess. So I'm looking for more cool people. It'll be around kindness, appreciation, just like creating a life you want. So thank you so much. You guys are awesome. So grateful to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. January, any last words?
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. This was such a powerful talk today because people need this. So I appreciate you, and thank you for doing this and deciding to continue on and move with this movement. So thank you so much, and thank you to our listeners, for listening to us and being dedicated to us. So thank you so much.
Yes.
You can find me on Finance Builders.
I was just going to say that. Go find January on Finance Builders and me on Hell of a Journey or Sexy Freedom Media. Please give us a 5-star, buy some coffees because we get thirsty. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Sharing is caring. We will talk to you later. Thank you. Ciao.
Aloha.
Want to hear more?
Visit us at sexyfreedommedia.com.